The courtroom was huge. Hana Kim had never seen anything like it before. The walls stretched up so high that she could not see the ceiling. Strange lights floated in the air, making everything glow with a soft blue color. She stood in the center of the room, feeling very small. Around her sat creatures from 12 different worlds. Some looked like giant insects with shiny shells. Others were made of what seemed like living crystal. A few looked almost like humans, but with too many arms or eyes in the wrong places. They all stared at her with interest and something that might have been fear. Hana wore her standard Earth military armor. The metal plates were scratched and dented from 7 years of fighting. Her helmet sat on the table next to her, showing her short black hair and tired face. She was 28 years old, but the war had made her look older. The judge was a tall creature made of blue crystal. Its voice sounded like wind chimes when it spoke. This court will now hear the case against the human species. The Vorthan Empire accuses humanity of war crimes during the recent conflict. The Vorthan prosecutor stood up. It looked like a giant praying mantis, but with 4 arms instead of 2. Its name was Klaxathul, and it spoke with a clicking sound that made Hana's teeth hurt. "Honored tribunal," Klaxathul said, "we present evidence that humans fight without honor. They use cruel methods that no civilized species would ever use. They break every rule of proper warfare." Holographic images appeared in the air above them. Hana watched herself and her fellow soldiers in battle. The images showed humans fighting in ways that seemed desperate and wild. She saw the underground tunnels collapsing in Seoul, trapping both human and Vorthan soldiers together. She saw human fighters using makeshift weapons and hiding in places where honorable warriors would never go. "Look at this," Klaxthul clicked. "In the Seoul Underground campaign, humans deliberately destroyed their own city's foundation. They trapped our forces in collapsed tunnels. This is not how wars should be fought. This is the behavior of animals, not intelligent beings." More images showed human soldiers refusing to surrender even when they were clearly beaten. The holographs displayed humans fighting with broken weapons, wounded humans still throwing rocks at Vorthan aircraft, and civilians joining battles when they had no training at all. "The humans show no respect for the accepted rules of engagement," Klaxthul continued. "When we offered them the standard terms of surrender, they ignored us. When we demonstrated our superior technology, they did not submit as logical beings should. Instead, they became more violent and unpredictable." The crystal judge turned to Hana. "Commander Kim, you are here to represent your species. How do you answer these charges?" Hana stood silent for a long moment. She looked around the courtroom at all the alien faces watching her. Some looked curious. Others seemed disgusted. A few appeared frightened, though she could not understand why. Then she reached up and began to unfasten her armor. The courtroom became very quiet. Even the floating lights seemed to dim. Hana's hands moved slowly and carefully as she removed each piece of her battle gear. First came the chest plate, heavy with reinforced steel and ceramic. It hit the floor with a loud clang that echoed through the huge room. Next came the arm guards, then the leg protection. Each piece of armor told a story through its damage. Blast marks from Vorthan energy weapons, deep scratches from when she had crawled through wreckage, burn marks from fires that had tried to consume her but failed. Klaxthul made an angry clicking sound. "What is the meaning of this display? This court requires proper respect, not theatrical gestures." But Hana continued removing her armor. The other aliens leaned forward in their seats, watching with growing fascination. They had never seen a human without protective gear before. Most species in the galaxy always wore some form of environmental suit or armor when dealing with other races. As the last pieces of armor fell away, Hana stood in only a simple gray undershirt and dark pants. For the first time, the tribunal could see her as she really was. She was smaller than they had expected and much more fragile looking, but what caught their attention were the scars. Her arms were covered with thin white lines and darker patches where skin had healed badly. Her neck showed the mark of what looked like a deep burn. Through her thin shirt, they could see the outline of more scars across her back and chest. "You want to know about honor?" Hana said quietly. Her voice was steady, but there was something dangerous in it. "You want to understand how humans fight? Then let me show you what your invasion did to us. Let me tell you what we learned about honor when you decided we were not worth treating as equals." She turned slowly so that all the tribunal members could see the damage that 7 years of war had left on her body. Each scar had a story. Each mark represented a choice she had made to keep fighting when any reasonable person would have given up. 7 years ago, your people came to our world, Hana said. You told us we were an inferior species. You said we were only good enough to work in your mines and factories. You never asked if we agreed with that assessment. The Vorthon prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. The humans were offered standard surrender terms. They were given the opportunity to submit peacefully. Peacefully, Hana repeated. She touched a long scar that ran from her left shoulder down to her elbow. Is this what you call peaceful? This is from when your soldiers bombed a hospital because they thought human children might grow up to be soldiers someday. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the floating lights had stopped moving. You came to our world with rules, Hana continued. Rules about how wars should be fought. Rules about when the losing side should surrender. Rules about what civilized species do when faced with superior force. But you never asked us if we knew those rules. You never asked us if we cared about those rules. She pointed to another scar, this one on her right arm. This is from when I helped destroy one of your supply ships. We used a bomb made from farming chemicals and old car parts. I know that is not how proper soldiers fight. I know it violated your rules of engagement. But your soldiers were using that ship to take human children to your slave colonies. Klaxthul tried to object. The relocation of human juveniles was part of standard conquest protocol. We were saving them from the violence their own species was creating. Saving them, Hana said. The way she spoke the words made several aliens in the courtroom step back. By taking them away from their families forever. By making them work in mines until they died. You call that saving. She began to walk around the center of the courtroom, still wearing only her thin clothes, still showing her scars to everyone present. You want to know why we fought the way we did? You want to understand why we broke your rules? Because your rules were designed by species who had something to lose by fighting. Your rules were made by creatures who could afford to surrender because surrender meant they would still exist afterward. The crystal judge spoke carefully. What do you mean by this statement? Hana stopped walking and faced the tribunal directly. When you invaded the Kalari system, what happened to the Kalari people after they surrendered? There was an uncomfortable silence. When you conquered the Tolar worlds, where are the Tolar now? More silence. You do not know, do you? Because they are gone. They followed your rules. They surrendered when logic said they could not win. And now they exist only as workers in your empire, with no worlds of their own, no families, no future except what you allow them to have. Hana raised her scarred arms. We looked at your rules and decided we would rather have scars than follow them. We decided we would rather bleed than disappear. And that is why you are here, in this courtroom, trying to convince other species that we are the ones who fight without honor. The courtroom remained silent for a very long time. Hana looked down at her scarred arms and began to speak again. Each mark on her skin had a story, and she was going to tell them all. 7 years ago, I was a student, she said. I studied engineering at Seoul National University. I lived in a small apartment with my younger brother Jinwoo. He was 16 and wanted to be a teacher. We had normal lives, normal problems. Our biggest worry was whether Jinwoo would pass his history exam. The aliens in the courtroom listened carefully. Many of them had never heard a human talk about life before the war. The day your ships arrived, I was in the library studying for my final project. The building started shaking, and at first we thought it was an earthquake. Then someone screamed and pointed at the windows. Your ships covered the sky like a black cloud. They were so big that they blocked out the sun. Hana touched the burn scar on her left shoulder. The skin was still rough and darker than the rest of her arm. The first thing your forces did was send out machines to capture humans. You called them pacification drones, but we had a different name for them. We called them kidnappers. They would grab people off the streets and load them into transport ships. Children, elderly people, anyone they could catch. She remembered that first day clearly. The drones had looked like giant metal spiders with grabbing arms. They moved fast and made no sound except for a low humming that made people feel sick. Jinwoo was walking home from school when one of those machines took him. I saw it happen from my apartment window. He tried to run, but the drone was too fast. It wrapped metal arms around him and carried him away. I never saw him again. The courtroom was very quiet. Several of the alien judges looked uncomfortable. I ran outside to try to help him, but there were drones everywhere. One of them shot at me with some kind of energy weapon. That is how I got this burn. I was lucky it only hit my shoulder and not my head. Hana moved her hand to a different scar, this one running along her right forearm. It was long and jagged, like something had torn through her skin. 2 days later, your soldiers started bombing our cities. They said they were targeting military bases, but most of our military had already been destroyed when your ships first arrived. What they were really doing was trying to make us too afraid to fight back. She remembered hiding in the subway tunnels with hundreds of other people. The ground would shake every few minutes when another bomb exploded above them. Children cried and adults tried to pretend they were not as scared as they really were. Mrs. Park lived in the apartment next to mine. She was 70 years old and could barely walk without her cane. When the bombing started, I went back to get her. Her building was on fire, and there was broken glass everywhere. Hannah had crawled through the burning hallway on her hands and knees. The smoke was so thick she could not see where she was going. She had found Mrs. Park trapped under a fallen beam, too scared to move. I got this scar pulling her out of the wreckage. A piece of hot metal fell on my arm when I was carrying her to safety. But Mrs. Park lived. She made it to the underground shelters where she was safe. The Vorthon prosecutor clicked his mandibles impatiently. These personal stories do not address the charges of improper warfare tactics. Hannah looked at him with eyes that made him step backward. Everything I am telling you is about warfare tactics. You just do not understand them yet. She pointed to another scar, this one near her collarbone. This one is from the chemical attack on Busan. Your forces used banned weapons on civilian areas. We did not have proper protective equipment, so we made our own from plastic sheets and duct tape. The makeshift hazmat suits had not worked very well. The chemicals had eaten through the plastic and burned her skin. But she had stayed in the contaminated area long enough to help evacuate a school full of children. Lieutenant Minho Choi taught me how to make explosives from household items. He was not a soldier before the war. He used to fix computers for a living. But when your forces took over the subway system, he decided to take it back. They had worked together in the dark tunnels, setting up bombs made from fertilizer and old electronics. It was dangerous work. One wrong move could have killed them both. Minho showed me how to connect the wires without making sparks, how to time the explosion so our people could escape before your soldiers knew what was happening. I got this scar on my arm when we were installing a device under Central Station. A piece of sharp metal cut me, but we finished the job anyway. The explosives had worked perfectly. When the Vorthon forces tried to use the subway to move troops quickly across the city, the tunnels collapsed on them. It trapped hundreds of enemy soldiers underground and blocked their main supply route for weeks. You call our tactics improper because we did not fight the way you expected. But we learned our tactics from you. We learned them from watching what you did to other worlds. Hannah walked closer to the Vorthon prosecutor. Even without her armor, she was not afraid of him. We studied your previous conquest while we fought you. We learned about the Kalari and how they tried to negotiate peace treaties. We learned about the Toller and how they followed your rules of surrender. We learned about 6 different species that did exactly what you told them to do. She gestured to her scars again. And we learned what happened to all of them afterward. So we decided to try something different. We decided to fight like humans instead of fighting like the species you had beaten before. The crystal judge spoke carefully. What does it mean to fight like humans? Hannah smiled, but it was not a happy expression. It means we do not have backup planets. Earth is the only world we have ever known. It means we do not have colonies scattered across the galaxy where our species can survive if our homeworld is destroyed. It means that when someone tries to take our home away from us, we have nowhere else to go. She touched a small round scar on her neck. This is from when I tried to sabotage one of your communication towers. I climbed up the outside of the building at night, but one of your security systems detected me. It shot me with some kind of dart that made me fall 3 stories to the ground. The fall had broken 2 of her ribs and given her a concussion. But she had completed her mission first. The communication tower had stopped working for 6 days, which gave human resistance fighters time to coordinate attacks across the entire city. You want to know about honor? Let me tell you about Corporal Sujin Lee. She was 19 years old and had been in the army for exactly 4 months when your invasion started. When your forces surrounded her unit, she had a choice. She could surrender and save her own life, or she could stay and fight even though she knew she would die. Hannah's voice became very quiet. Sujin chose to keep fighting. She held her position for 6 hours while her unit evacuated civilians from a nearby hospital. She killed 47 of your soldiers before they finally killed her. But because of what she did, 300 sick and injured humans escaped to safety. The aliens in the courtroom looked at each other nervously. They were beginning to understand that humans had a very different idea of what honor meant. Every scar on my body is a lesson, Hannah said. Every mark teaches me something about what it means to be human. Some of them taught me about pain, others taught me about fear, but all of them taught me the most important lesson of all. She stood straight and looked directly at each member of the tribunal. They taught me that humans do not break. Hana turned to face the tribunal members directly. I am not the only human who bears scars from your invasion. I call my fellow soldiers to testify about what we learned during 7 years of war. The courtroom doors opened, and 5 other humans walked in. Like Hana, they wore simple civilian clothes instead of military uniforms. Like Hana, their bodies told stories of survival and sacrifice. The first witness was Sergeant Hyunwoo Nam. He walked with mechanical legs that clicked against the courtroom floor with each step. Both of his natural legs had been lost in the Antarctic campaign, but he moved with confidence and pride. Tell the tribunal about the South Pole defense, Hana said. Hyunwoo stood straight despite his prosthetics. The Vorthons attacked our research stations in Antarctica because they wanted to capture our ice drilling technology. They thought it would be an easy target because only a few hundred scientists and support staff were stationed there. He smiled as he remembered the battle. What they did not know was that those scientists included some of the smartest people on Earth. Glaciologists who understood ice better than any species in the galaxy. Engineers who had designed equipment to work in the harshest environment on our planet. The Antarctic defenders had done something that the Vorthon military computers had labeled as impossible. They had held defensive positions in temperatures that should have killed any organic life form within hours. We dug tunnels in the ice and lived underground for 3 months, Hyunwoo continued. The Vorthons could not understand how we survived in conditions that would freeze their equipment solid. They kept sending more troops, but we had advantages they could not overcome. Hyunwoo pulled up his shirt to show scars from frostbite that covered his chest and arms. We lost fingers and toes to the cold. Some of us lost entire limbs, but we held our positions because we knew that every day we delayed them was another day for our families to evacuate from other parts of the world. The Vorthon prosecutor clicked his mandibles. The human defense of Antarctica was tactically meaningless. The research stations contained no strategic value. The stations were not important, Hyunwoo agreed. But the time was priceless. While you were sending thousands of soldiers to capture a few buildings in the snow, our people were escaping from cities all over the planet. We traded our legs for their lives, and we would make the same choice again. The second witness was Dr. Yoonji Park. Her hands were covered with chemical burns that had never properly healed. She had been a graduate student studying organic chemistry when the war began. Dr. Park, Hana said, please tell the tribunal about your work during the chemical attacks. Yoonji held up her damaged hand so everyone could see them clearly. When the Vorthons began using poison gas on our cities, our government asked me to help develop countermeasures. I had no experience with military applications, but I understood how molecules worked. She had worked in her apartment kitchen because her university laboratory had been destroyed in the bombing, using equipment salvaged from ruined buildings. She had tested hundreds of different compounds on herself to find antidotes to the Vorthon chemical weapons. I mixed acids and bases in cooking pots, she said. I tested each formula by exposing myself to small amounts of the enemy chemicals and then taking my experimental treatments. Many of the tests burned my skin or made me very sick, but I kept working until I found combinations that worked. The alien judges looked horrified. Several of them had never heard of anyone deliberately poisoning themselves for research purposes. The scars on my hands are from handling corrosive compounds without proper protective equipment, Yoonji continued. But those scars represent the lives of thousands of people who survived the chemical attacks because of the antidotes I developed. She smiled proudly at her damaged hands. More importantly, the research taught me how to create our own chemical weapons using Vorthon compounds as a starting point. Within 6 weeks, we were using their own poison against them, but in ways their scientists had never imagined. The third witness was Colonel Dong-ho Lee. He spoke loudly because his hearing had been damaged by explosions. He had been a city planner before the war, but he had become one of the most effective resistance leaders on the planet. Colonel Lee, Hana said, please describe the urban resistance networks. Dong-ho gestured to several scars on his arms and face. When the Vorthons occupied our cities, they expected to control them the same way they had controlled cities on other worlds. They set up checkpoints and patrols and monitoring systems that had worked perfectly on 6 different planets. But human cities were different. They had not been designed with alien occupation in mind. The buildings and streets and underground systems had been built by humans for human purposes. We turned every city into a maze, Dongo said. We created hidden passages between buildings, secret supply routes through storm drains, and communication networks that used systems the Vortans did not even know existed. His hearing had been damaged when he stayed behind to manually detonate charges during the liberation of Tokyo. The explosion had been powerful enough to bring down an entire city block, trapping a Vorthan armored division in the rubble. I lost most of my hearing in that explosion, Dongho said, but the blast created a gap in their defensive line that allowed our forces to retake the central district. The scars were worth it because they represented freedom for 2 million people. The fourth witness was Baekhyun Yoon. He had been a high school teacher before the war, but circumstances had turned him into one of the most successful saboteurs in the resistance movement. Mr. Yoon, Hana said, explain to the tribunal what humans mean by acceptable losses. Baekhyun touched a scar that ran from his left ear to his jaw. The Vorthans have a concept called acceptable casualties, which means how many soldiers they are willing to lose to achieve an objective. But humans have a different concept called acceptable sacrifice. He had been caught while destroying a Vorthan supply depot and tortured for information about other resistance cells. The scar on his face was from where his captors had tried to make him talk. Acceptable sacrifice means what we are willing to give up to protect others, Baekhyun continued. For humans, the acceptable level of personal sacrifice to save our families is everything. We will give up our lives, our health, our future, anything necessary to keep our loved ones safe. The torture had lasted for 3 days, but Baekhyun had not revealed any information about his fellow fighters. Eventually, other resistance members had rescued him, but the scars remained as reminders of what he had been willing to endure. I tell my students that scars are not signs of failure, he said. Scars are proof that we survived something that tried to destroy us. Every mark on our bodies represents a moment when we chose to keep fighting instead of giving up. The final witness was Captain Minji Han. She had been a commercial pilot before the war, but she had become one of the most feared human fighter pilots in the conflict. Captain Han, Hana said, tell them about the Battle of the Moon. Minji showed the tribunal burn scars that covered the left side of her face and neck. The Vorthans had established a military base on our moon to control orbital traffic around Earth. They thought it was an impregnable position because humans had no way to mount a significant attack at that distance. But the humans had surprised them again. Using converted civilian spacecraft and weapons cobbled together from mining equipment, a small fleet of human volunteers had attacked the lunar base. We knew it was a suicide mission, Minji said. Our ships were not designed for combat, and we had no chance of surviving a direct confrontation with Vorthan military vessels. But we also knew that destroying their moon base would give our planet's defenders a crucial advantage. Minji's ship had been shot down during the battle, but not before she had crashed it into the base's main power generator. The explosion had crippled the facility and forced the Vorthans to abandon their orbital superiority. I got these scars when my ship's engine exploded, she said. But I survived the crash and our mission succeeded. The Vorthans lost their best strategic position because they never expected humans to sacrifice spacecraft and pilots for such a small tactical gain. Hana looked at all of her fellow veterans, each marked by their own scars, each representing a different aspect of human resistance. You see, she told the tribunal, we did not fight your war. We fought our own war, using our own rules for our own reasons. She gestured to all of their scars. Every mark on our bodies represents a choice. We chose to bear these wounds rather than accept your version of peace. We chose to suffer rather than submit, and we chose to keep fighting even when logic said we should surrender. The alien judges sat in stunned silence, beginning to understand what they were really seeing. These were not just war criminals or military defendants. They were representatives of a species that had decided that freedom was worth any price, including permanent physical damage to themselves. We did not win because we were stronger than you, Hana continued. We won because we were willing to sacrifice more than you thought any intelligent species would sacrifice. Our scars are not signs of defeat. They are proof that we are still here, still free and still human. Hana stood before the tribunal for her final statement. Her fellow humans had returned to their seats, but their scars remained visible to everyone in the courtroom. The alien judges looked troubled and uncertain. Honored Tribunal, Hana began, you have heard the Vorthan Empire accuse humanity of fighting without honor. You have seen evidence of our tactics and heard testimony about our methods. Now I will tell you why this trial exists and what it really means. She walked slowly around the center of the courtroom, making eye contact with each alien judge. This trial is not about war crimes or violations of galactic law. This trial is about fear. The Vorthans are afraid of what they learned about humans during 7 years of war, and they want you to share that fear. The Vorthan prosecutor clicked his mandibles angrily. Humans consistently violated every accepted convention of civilized warfare. They must be held accountable for their actions. Accountable to whom? Hana asked. To the species who watched your empire conquer 6 worlds without offering any help to the victims? To the galactic community that never bothered to contact Earth until we had already defeated you? To the tribunal that only exists because you are embarrassed that a primitive species refused to follow your script? She pointed to her scars again. You invaded our world expecting us to behave like every other species you had conquered. You had protocols for managing defeated populations and procedures for processing surrendered armies. You had calculated exactly how much pressure it would take to break human resistance. The holographic displays around the courtroom showed images of the war, human cities in ruins, Vorthan ships burning in Earth's atmosphere, and the final battle that had ended with Vorthan forces retreating from the solar system. But you made one critical error in your planning, Hana continued. You assumed that scars were evidence of damage. For humans, scars are proof of healing. Every mark on my body represents a moment when I survived something that should have killed me. Every scar is evidence that I am stronger now than I was before. She gestured to the other human witnesses. Look at us. We are not broken by our wounds. We are defined by our ability to heal from them and continue fighting. You tried to damage us, and instead you taught us how much we could endure. The crystal judge spoke carefully. What lesson do you believe the tribunal should learn from this conflict? Hana smiled, and for the first time it was a genuine expression of happiness. The lesson is simple. There are species in this galaxy who will negotiate when threatened. There are species who will surrender when defeated. There are species who will accept subjugation if the alternative is destruction. She raised her scarred arms high above her head. And then there are humans. We do not negotiate with kidnappers. We do not surrender when the odds are against us. We do not accept subjugation under any circumstances. When someone tries to take our freedom away from us, we fight back with everything we have. And we keep fighting until either we win or there are no humans left alive to fight. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the floating lights seemed to have stopped moving. 7 years ago, you told the galaxy that humans were an inferior species suitable only for manual labor, Hana said. Today, your empire is paying war reparations to Earth. Your military leaders have been replaced. Your expansion plans have been canceled, and you are standing in this courtroom trying to convince other species that we are the dangerous ones. She walked closer to the Vorthan prosecutor. Tell me, Klaxthul, how many other species have ever made your empire retreat? How many other worlds have ever forced you to change your invasion strategies? How many other populations have ever made you afraid? Klaxthul did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. The real reason this trial exists, Hana continued, is because you want the galaxy to believe that humans are uniquely violent and unpredictable. You want other species to think that our methods of warfare are somehow wrong or immoral. But what you are really saying is that humans are uniquely unwilling to be victims. The holographic displays changed to show current images of Earth. The planet was scarred but healing. Cities had been rebuilt with new technology. Memorials stood where battlefields had once raged. Children played in parks that had been bomb craters just a few years earlier. We did not win this war because we were cruel, Hana said. We won because we were stubborn. We did not defeat you because we were savage. We defeated you because we refused to accept defeat. Our scars do not represent hatred or vengeance. They represent our commitment to protecting the people we love. She turned to address the entire tribunal directly. You have a choice to make today. You can accept the Vorthan argument that humans fight without honor and should be punished for defending ourselves. Or you can recognize that humans fight with a different kind of honor, one that values freedom more than rules and family more than protocols. The alien judges looked at each other uncertainly. Many of them were beginning to understand that this case was about much more than military tactics. If you rule against humanity today, Hana warned. You are telling every species in the galaxy that they should submit to superior force, rather than resist invasion. You are saying that surrender is more honorable than sacrifice. You are declaring that following galactic law is more important than protecting your own people. She gestured to her fellow humans one final time. But if you rule in our favor, you are establishing a new precedent. You are saying that every species has the right to defend itself, using whatever methods are necessary. You are declaring that freedom is worth fighting for, even if the fight leaves scars. The Vorthan prosecutor made one last attempt. The humans violated every principle of civilized warfare. They cannot be allowed to set a precedent that encourages other species to ignore galactic conventions. Hana laughed, and the sound echoed through the huge courtroom. What conventions? The ones that allowed you to conquer 6 worlds without interference? The ones that defined civilians as acceptable targets for relocation and forced labor? The ones that made slavery legal as long as you called it something else? She stood tall and proud, her scars visible to everyone present. We ignored your conventions because your conventions were designed to make conquest easier and resistance harder. We created our own rules because your rules were written by predators for the benefit of predators. The Crystal Judge called for a recess to deliberate. The alien tribunal members filed out of the courtroom, leaving the humans alone with their thoughts and their scars. 3 hours later, the judges returned. The crystal being who served as the tribunal's chair spoke in its wind chime voice. This court finds that the human species acted within its rights of self-defense during the Vorthan invasion. The charges of war crimes are dismissed. Furthermore, the Vorthan Empire is ordered to pay full reparations to Earth and to formally recognize human sovereignty over the Sol system. But the judge was not finished. More importantly, this tribunal hereby establishes the principle of species self-determination. Any species has the right to defend itself against invasion using whatever methods it deems necessary, regardless of galactic conventions or interstellar law. Hana smiled as she heard the ruling. The scars had been worth it after all. 6 months later, Hana returned to Earth wearing new armor. It was not human-made, but gifts from a dozen different alien species who now sought alliance rather than conquest. The armor was more advanced than anything Earth's military had ever produced, but underneath it, the scars remained. She visited the memorial where the names of the lost were carved in black stone. Her brother Jinwoo's name was there, along with millions of others who had died defending their home. She traced his name with a scarred finger and whispered words only he could hear. We did it, Jinwoo. We're still here. We're still standing, and now the whole galaxy knows that humans do not break. Above her, Earth's sky was clear and blue. Alien ships moved peacefully through the orbital lanes, bringing trade and friendship instead of conquest. The planet bore scars from the war, but like its people, it had healed stronger than before. In the end, the scars had taught the galaxy the most important lesson of all. There are some species that cannot be conquered, cannot be broken, and cannot be made to surrender. There are some species that will bear any wound, pay any price, and endure any suffering to remain free. And sometimes, those species are called human. Hana continued her testimony, her voice steady and strong. The aliens in the courtroom leaned forward to hear every word. You invaded our world with a plan, she said. You had protocols and procedures that had worked on 6 other planets. You expected us to follow the same pattern as all the species you had conquered before us. But we had never heard of your protocols. The Crystal Judge made a sound like wind chimes. Please explain what you mean. On every other world you conquered, the local species had been part of the galactic community for hundreds of years. They knew the rules of interstellar warfare. They understood concepts like proper surrender and acceptable losses. But humans had never met any aliens before you arrived. We did not know there were rules. Hana pointed to a jagged scar that ran along her ribs. This is from the Busan incident. Your history books probably call it a violation of the Kepler Convention on Proportional Response. We called it Tuesday. She remembered that day clearly. The Vorthan forces had surrounded the coastal city and demanded immediate surrender. They had given the humans exactly 1 hour to comply with their terms. Your commander announced that if the city did not surrender, you would destroy it completely. You thought this would make us afraid. You thought we would give up to save our lives. But you did not understand something important about humans. The Vorthan prosecutor clicked impatiently. What did we not understand? We do not negotiate with kidnappers, Hana said simply. When someone threatens to hurt innocent people unless we do what they want, we do not try to find a compromise. We find a way to stop them. The Busan defenders had done something that no other species had ever attempted. Instead of surrendering or fighting a traditional battle they could not win, they had evacuated every civilian in the city to boats and submarines. Then they had triggered explosives in the mountains above the city. "We brought down half a mountain on your landing force," Hana said. "The avalanche buried 3,000 of your soldiers and destroyed most of your heavy equipment. It also destroyed Busan, but we had already moved everyone to safety." The aliens in the courtroom made shocked sounds. Several of them had never heard of anyone destroying their own city to win a battle. "Your tactical computers had never seen anything like it," Hana continued. "The avalanche was not in any of your databases of possible responses. You had planned for human surrender, human resistance, even human kamikaze attacks, but you had not planned for humans who would sacrifice their own infrastructure to deny it to you." Klaxthul waved his forearms angrily. The destruction of Busan was wasteful and illogical. The humans gained nothing by making their own city uninhabitable. "We gained time," Hana replied. "Every day we delayed your advance was another day for our families to escape. Every hour we held you back was another hour for our scientists to study your technology and find weaknesses." She touched another scar, this one on her left hand. "Captain Sujin Lee was in command of our orbital defense station when you attacked it. You had overwhelming firepower and she had only one small platform with outdated weapons. Your battle plan said she should surrender immediately to avoid unnecessary casualties. But Captain Lee had not followed their battle plan. Instead, she had done something that the Vorthon military computers called impossible. She rammed your flagship with her station," Hana said. "A direct collision at orbital velocity. Your ship was destroyed and so was our station, but your admiral died in the explosion. It took you 3 weeks to reorganize your command structure and choose a new leader." Hana remembered listening to Captain Lee's final transmission. Her voice had been calm and professional even though she knew she was about to die. Lee's last words were transmitted on all frequencies, so every human could hear them. She said, "They expect us to fight by their rules. But they never asked what our rules were." The courtroom was very quiet. The alien judges looked confused and disturbed. "What are human rules of warfare?" the crystal judge asked. Hana smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Rule number 1, there are no civilians when someone threatens our families. Rule number 2, there is no such thing as an acceptable loss when we are fighting for our home. Rule number 3, we do not surrender as long as any of us are still alive to fight." She pointed to a burn mark near her collarbone. "This is from when your forces used chemical weapons on our cities. According to galactic law, chemical attacks on population centers are illegal, but you used them anyway because you thought humans would not be able to respond effectively. The chemical attacks had been designed to break human morale. The Vorthons had expected humans to panic and beg for mercy when they saw their people suffering from the toxic gases. Instead, we adapted," Hana said. "Dr. Yoonji Park was a chemistry student before the war. When your chemicals started killing our people, she decided to learn how to make antidotes. She worked in her kitchen using equipment from her university laboratory. Yoonji had mixed compounds in pots and pans, testing each formula on herself to see if it worked. The chemicals had burned her hands and arms, but she had kept working until she found treatments that could save lives. Yoonji's antidotes saved thousands of people, but more importantly, she taught us how to make our own chemical weapons using your compounds as a base. Within a month, we were using your own poison against your soldiers." Klaxthul made an angry clicking sound. "The human use of modified chemical weapons violated 17 different galactic treaties." "Which treaties?" Hana asked. "The ones that humans never signed because we did not know they existed? The ones that were written by species who had never had to fight for their survival?" She walked closer to the Vorthon prosecutor. "You came to our world with rules that were designed to minimize damage to valuable infrastructure. Rules that assumed the losing side would want to preserve their population for future use. Rules that made sense when both sides had other planets to retreat to if they lost." The aliens looked uncomfortable. They were starting to understand that humans had never been playing the same game as everyone else. "We did not care about preserving infrastructure that you were going to steal anyway," Hana continued. "We did not worry about population casualties because you were planning to turn our people into slaves. We did not concern ourselves with galactic law because no one had bothered to tell us it existed." She gestured to her scars again. Every mark on my body represents a choice we made to ignore your rules and follow our own. Every scar is proof that we decided our freedom was worth more than your approval." The crystal judge spoke carefully. "What would you have done differently if you had known about galactic warfare conventions?" Hana looked directly at him. "Nothing. We would have done exactly the same things, but we might have done them faster if we had understood from the beginning that you were following a script." She pointed to a long scar that wrapped around her upper arm. "This is from when we figured out how to hack your drone control systems. You had assumed that a primitive species like humans would not be able to understand your technology, but you forgot that desperation makes people very creative. The human hackers had worked for months to break the Vorthon encryption codes. When they finally succeeded, they had turned the enemy's own drones against them. Hundreds of Vorthon soldiers had been killed by their own machines. Your rules assumed that warfare was a rational process where both sides would eventually reach a logical conclusion," Hana said. "But humans do not fight wars to reach logical conclusions. We fight wars to protect the people we love. And when someone threatens the people we love, logic becomes much less important than victory." The courtroom fell silent again. The alien judges were beginning to realize that they were not just hearing about human war tactics. They were learning about an entirely different way of thinking about conflict itself.